Bienvenue à Coffee Break French.
Welcome back to the Coffee Break French Show. Moi, c'est Marc.
Et je suis Max.
Comment vas-tu, Max?
Très très bien, et toi?
Ça va. Il faut dire, j'ai un tout petit peu peur aujourd'hui.
Oui?
I'm a little bit scared today because the topic of today's lesson is something that I find quite tricky. But all will be explained.
It will.
This is, of course, the Coffee Break French Show, and in these weekly episodes, we're helping you take your French to the next level, one coffee break at a time.
And if you're listening to the podcast, remember to subscribe to the podcast feed wherever you get your podcast. And if you're watching the video version, subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Alors, de quoi parle-t-on aujourd'hui?
Alors, Marc, on parle des liaisons.
Les liaisons. So this is a dangerous liaisons episode.
Oui.
Shall we get started?
Allez.
So the whole idea of liaisons, liaison in French, liaison in English, is that they involve how one word joins to the next in pronunciation.
Yes, so it's a final consonant that's normally silent.
Yep.
But if the next word starts with a vowel, the consonant runs into the next word.
Exactly. Perhaps the first thing that we should do is look at an example of this, a very common example.
Yes, I agree, because as you said, it's particularly tricky and a little bit scary for learners, so we can ease our way into it with a quite straightforward situation.
Okay. Of course, it's our job to make it not scary. Coffee break, that's what we do.
So let's consider the verb avoir in the present tense.
Yep.
Right? So we can ignore je, tu, il, and elle because they end in a vowel, so they won't have any liaison. But on, nous, vous, il, and elle plural will have a liaison.
Okay.
So we have on a.
Right. So normally we would say on, a kind of nasal N. And then the next word is a. So the N sound becomes a kind of normal N. It's no longer a nasal N. And we say on a.
So you can still consider on as it is, but imagine the next word starting with an extra N, if you want. So on a.
On a. On a.
On a, which means we have.
Yeah.
And the other way of saying we have is nous avons.
Yeah. So nous, ending in an S, and avons, ending in or starting with an A, with a vowel sound. Then we've got nous avons, but nous avons when it runs together.
Yes, almost like a Z,
Yeah.
more than an S. Nous avons.
And what was interesting with what Max did just there, he said nous avons, and he put the Z at the beginning of the next word. I think that's very natural, isn't it?
Yes, and it would be sounding a bit off if you said nous avons.
Exactly. So we've got on a, nous avons,
Vous avez.
vous avez, same thing happens with that S. And then we've got il and elle plural, which of course are spelled I-L-S and E-L-L-E-S. Therefore, there are S's on the end there.
And again, the Z sound, ils ont, elles ont.
Ils ont, elles ont. Okay, so these are examples of liaison when we've got that sound at the end of a word running into the next word and then becoming sounded rather than silent.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is good because we already identified two types of liaison.
Yeah. And there are more, aren't they?
Just a couple, Mark.
Okay, what's next?
So about the Z that we hear in nous avons, vous avez, or ils ont, it happens with a final S, but also a final X or a final Z.
Okay, so can you give us some examples of each of these?
Yes, for example, the X is numéro deux, number two, deux amis.
Right, so two friends is not deux amis, but deux amis.
Exactly, and this is compulsory. You don't get to choose.
Yeah, because there are some that are optional, aren't there?
Exactly, so you have three kinds of liaison, the compulsory, optional, and forbidden.
But I think for this episode, we'll just focus on the compulsory ones.
I think there's more than enough for one episode.
Okay. So you said about X, as in deux amis. And what about a Z example?
To say, we can say chez, which is at someone's.
Yeah.
So chez un ami.
Chez un ami, okay. And we've got two liaisons in there. So chez un ami.
Which brings us to the next point, Mark. The liaison with N.
Yeah.
So very common, the word un, say a or one. if the next word starts with a vowel,
Yep.
you have to have the liaison.
Yeah. So you said there, un ami.
Un ami.
So un, normally, with just that nasal sound. We keep the nasal sound and then stick an N in front. Not in actual fact, we don't write it down, but in our heads, we put an N at the beginning of the next word that starts with a vowel. So un ami.
Exactement. How would you say a bird?
Un oiseau.
Un oiseau. Exactement.
Un oiseau. Do you know, it reminds me of something. In English, we say this afternoon. And when I was little, I thought the word was s'afternoon because it's the s'afternoon. So that's an English liaison there that we don't even think about.
Okay, alors, qu'est-ce qu'on a d'autre?
Well, these liaisons that we're talking about so far, like un oiseau, un ami, and so on, we can refer to this as un groupe nominal, can we?
Un groupe nominal, indeed. So it's a bit of a grammatical term, but it's fairly straightforward. It describes an article, could be un, les, des, etc., plus a noun.
Yeah. And we also have the situation where we could add an adjective into that, and it's still un groupe nominal.
Exactement. So we had un ami, which is a groupe nominal, or un super ami is also un groupe nominal.
So the liaisons that we're talking about so far, these are within these groupes nominaux.
Yes.
And therefore they are compulsory.
Exactly. So maybe useful to have a couple of words that can make a groupe nominal. Par exemple, un, we had a look. Des, les, mes, and all the numbers as well. We had deux earlier.
Yeah.
So for all of these, the liaison is compulsory.
So thinking of my friends, mes amis.
Mes amis.
You never say mes amis.
Never.
Has to run together. Or we could think of, for example, 3 flats, 3 apartments.
Oui, 3 appartements.
So 3 appartements, the S of 3 continues on into appartement.
Exactement.
Okay.
So we had a look at the N sound liaison, the Z sound liaison.
So after S or X or Z.
Exactement. Can move on to a third one?
Yeah, go for it.
Oui, which is the T sound.
Of course, yeah. So for example, if we were talking about a little friend or indeed a boyfriend.
Oui, un petit ami.
Un petit ami. Now, that word petite, it's not P-E-T-I-T-E, because it's the masculine form. We're talking about a boyfriend, un petit ami, but we do sound the T before the ami because of the liaison rule.
Exactement. So the way to know if it's a boyfriend or girlfriend is the un or une.
Exactly. So, un petit ami, une petite amie. It actually sounds the same, but it would be spelled differently because petite amie, female version, P-E-T-I-T-E, and then A-M-I-E.
Exactement.
Okay.
And you can also think of words ending with a T like tout, in tout à fait.
Tout à fait, tout à fait. A lovely expression. You know, exactly. Tout à fait.
Tout à fait means of course, absolutely.
So T-O-U-T, and then that ending T, normally we would say tout.
Oui.
But when it runs into the A of the A, tout à fait, we hear it.
And there's another word that triggers a T sound liaison that is not a T.
I see where you're going here.
Oui, c'est le mot quand.
Quand. So Q-U-A-N-D. It means when. And it ends in a D.
It does.
But we've got a liaison in some situations.
Yes, and the liaison is a T liaison.
Yeah.
But not always, because it gets tricky with quand.
Okay, so there are some exceptions here, but perhaps we'll deal with them in the second episode on liaison. Yeah?
Yes. Let's focus on the compulsory one for now. And when quand is followed by est-ce que, so in a question, it is compulsory.
Right. So, quand est-ce que tu viens ce soir?
Oui, when are you coming tonight? Quand est-ce, with a T sound.
Yeah, okay.
Or also when it's followed by a subject pronoun. Il, elle, on, and il and elle plural.
So, quand il arrivera, when he arrives, we'll do something or whatever.
And once again, compulsory here.
Yeah.
Exactement.
Okay. Good. Right. And Max, what about comment? Because that's another question word that ends in a T. Is there a liaison there?
It's most of the time forbidden.
Okay.
For comment, except for the one phrase, comment allez-vous?
Comment allez-vous? So otherwise we'd say comment a.
Oui, comment est, comment a, etc.
Okay.
It's forbidden most of the time, except for comment allez-vous?
Comment allez-vous? How are you? Okay, we'll keep that in mind. maybe a little summary now of what we've learned so far about liaisons. And these are compulsory liaisons that we've been talking about today. We began by looking at N liaisons. So when a word ends in N and the next word starts in a vowel, we sound that N. So rather than making it a nasal sound like un ami.
Oui, parfait.
Then we talked about the S, X, and Z liaisons. Give us a quick example.
Deux enfants.
Deux enfants, okay. And then we also talked about the T liaisons.
Yeah, the T sound, because it can also be a D.
A
for
D,
this one.
yeah. So, quand est-ce que tu viens? Or the tout à fait example.
Parfait. Très bien.
Okay.
Before we finish, Mark, I think we could give you a couple of words that normally trigger a liaison.
Okay, sounds good.
Right? For example, en.
Right.
N.
Okay, so give us an example.
En avril.
Right. So in April, en avril. We still keep that nasal sound. It's still en, but we put the N in front of avril.
Exactement.
En avril.
It's a bit like this afternoon.
Yeah.
Earlier.
Exactly.
Sans, without.
Mm-hmm. So.
Sans aucun doute.
Sans aucun doute. So S-A-N-S, it ends in an S, and we run that S into the next vowel sound if it's followed by a vowel.
Ouais. Or plus, because plus and plus can already be tricky in itself.
Yeah.
But plus followed by an adjective, always.
Okay.
So, plus important.
Plus important. Okay. So, yeah, don't worry about plus and plus. It can be tricky, as Max said. I think we've got another episode already on that one.
Oui, je crois.
So, think of it with an adjective, plus important, plus intelligent, and so on.
Ouais. Dans, very useful word, dans. So if it's followed by un or une, for example, dans un appartement.
So double liaison there, points, extra points. Dans un appartement.
Oui.
Okay.
It's very rare to have a sentence without any liaison in French.
Yeah.
And chez that we mentioned earlier is always also.
Okay. Chez elle, chez un ami, and so on.
Ouais.
Okay. I think one of the most important things to say about liaison. I started the episode by saying that liaisons are dangerous, making reference to the famous book by Laclos. However, they're not really dangerous in the sense that once you listen, once you experience French, you hear them all the time. And what I would suggest you do is try to listen out for them and then copy what native speakers say, even though native speakers sometimes get them wrong.
We do. We do.
What was the example you were talking about earlier?
Oh, the liaison fantôme, which is a ghost liaison that has no reason to be there. But for example, some people would say, j'ai quatre amis, while quatre does not have a final S.
Yeah, but because it's plural, we've got les quatre amis and so on. Yeah, I've heard this, definitely. So keep that in mind. We're going to continue talking about liaisons in the next episode because we've only really talked so far about those compulsory ones today.
Yes, and we'll talk about the forbidden ones.
Okay, we look forward to that. Hope that you have found this useful. I've certainly found it useful because, as I said at the beginning, I find liaisons just a little bit tricky. However, one thing about this is that it really helps to see all of these written down because then you'll see these N's and S's and X's and so on. So we've put together a blog article to help you, and there's a link in the description of this podcast for you to be able to access that.
Super. And if you'd like more help with your French, we send out regular free email lessons. If you're interested, visit coffeebreaklanguages.com/French.
You can look out for that next lesson in your inbox. For now, merci beaucoup, Max.
Et merci à toi.
Merci à vous et à la prochaine.
Happy coffee breaking.
You have been listening to a Coffee Break Languages production for the Radiolingua Network. Copyright 2024 Radiolingua Limited. Recording copyright 2024 Radiolingua Limited. All rights reserved.